Hey folks, this is Tolly and welcome to some more game dev. We're jumping back in again today, looking at some more option screen stuff. We didn't really finish it up in the last stream yesterday, so we're coming back, and we're just going to continue. Now, I did do a little bit of work off camera since we last looked at this. We mostly had the UI part figured out in the first stream yesterday for this. And off camera, I kind of did a little bit of back-end work. So I have like a save manager that does a lot of like the saving of the save file stuff. Obviously, it's a save manager, but I've made a new variation of that called option manager. And it's essentially just a reduced down version that's going to be saving some information into the player preferences. It's essentially just, that's it. It just gets initialized. It tries to get the option data if it can, and then use it, and then we'll be able to save out the option data at certain points when we modify stuff. In order to make that work, we had to make a option data class, which is essentially holding a list of audio option datas, so what mixer type and what its volume is, as well as an enum for the current navigation control. Beyond that, it's mostly kind of just picking up where we left off in the last stream, and mostly just focusing on the data backend for the UI that we built. It looks like I was in the middle of copying some stuff in here. We will figure out some of this in a moment. Okay, let's see if we can get to no errors so that we can show the current state of things. Unity's compiling. It's thinking about it. It's doing its Unity thinky thing. Having some difficulties seeing Twitch. It looks like we're good on YouTube, but I am seeing some oddness on the Twitch side. I think we're okay, but partly it's a hope. All right. I'm seeing the hydration from unlockables, so I think we're fine. Cool. Did Unity finish loading? It did. Let's see if this goes, and then I'm going to do that hydrate real quick. Okay, and then my avatar is up and running, right? Yeah, it's responding. Cool. So we got a couple extra buttons. Yeah, we got a couple extra buttons on here. Mainly the option one was the big one here, and we can navigate into these, but they don't do anything. We can't hit left and right to modify the actual sounds, and we can't hit A or left or right in order to actually change the navigation here. So that's what we're going to be working on today, is getting it so that these UI menus are actually doing something and not just for show. So let's go start with the sound options screen, because I still think that's going to be the easiest. Mostly because it's going to be just changing a float value up and down within a kind of min and max. If we look at the audio manager, I'm setting up this set mixer volume, which is going to take a type. And we've also made it so that on selecting each of the buttons, we're now saving what enum type that button is associated with. So we should be able to just do, based off the currently selected audio mixer type, let's even just set the volume to like 0.5 or something. Ooh, this brings up an interesting question actually. What is the range of our audio? I have it as an integer. Perhaps this should be between 0 and 10. Maybe we start with 0 and like I don't know. What did I set here when I initially set it up? I set it as 7. Okay, so I think probably 0 or even 1 to 10 would probably be fine. So we should start at 7. Let's just say that when we I guess when we go up, we're going to have to actually contact the options manager. Option manager.instance. option data, and then we're going to need to get the associated audio options. And if we're going to get this as a list, does this make sense to be a dictionary? Yeah, just working out my data types and realizing it's set up a little bit oddly. I think this is slightly better. Mostly because I'm not going to have to do a search through the lists now to find it. I can just pass in each key. And then we're just going to need to update the new call here. And this should serialize out to the save file basically the same. Yeah, this should be good. So now we can use the current mixer type and we can get the current volume amount. And we can essentially plus that. And if the volume value is greater than 10, maybe it's easier to do it in reverse. If it's less than 10, we can increase it. And then here we can decrease the associated mixer's volume as long as the value is greater than, let's say 2, so it goes to 1 at minimum, so 1 to 10. If it's less than 10, we'll go in and increase it to 10. Oh, this should be, if it's greater than 1, we can minus and go to 1. Okay, that makes sense. And then we'll need to update the audio manager with the current type and the current volume amount. Feels like a rather long reference we're doing every time here, but let's get it working and we'll worry about optimization after. Cool. So this should be able to set the volume. Now, this set float, I don't know what the range of this is for a mixer. If we look at the audio value inside of the mixer, and we select one of these, the volume seems to be some number in decibels. So it's not going to be a straight 1 to 1. So we're going to need to convert our number from 1 to 10 to be some value range in decimals. Let's hit stop here. What does this cap out at? It caps out at 20 and can go to -60. So it's kind of going to be on us to decide what that range is. I probably don't want to go all the way up to 20. Maybe we go up to like +5 and then down to like -40. Well, I guess the bottom should be essentially muting it. It should be turning it off. And if that's the case, we probably do want to go to 0 because that'll make the most sense. If I go to 0 volume on the slider, then I should get no audio at all. Okay. So then this volume is a number between 0 and 10. So we're going to get a LERP amount, which is going to be mathf.lerp. No, we just want to divide by the maximum. Wow. Okay. So this is not a hard problem, but for some reason my brain is not working on it. So how do we convert this from a 0 to 1? Why is that stumping me today? Let's find lerp in the entire solution. So normally it's the value over the total. I think the reason that doesn't make sense to me is because we're starting at 0. But maybe that's fine. I'm just going to work through it on a calculator. So if we have 0 divided by 10, that's going to be 0. If we have 10 divided by 10, that's going to be 1. If we have 9 divided by 10, it's going to be 90%. Okay, no, that's correct. So then we're going to need to times that by our range. So that's where the math f.lerp comes in handy. So here we can do interpolate between values. A is the starting value. So we want to go from 5 to negative 80 over that lerp amount. Volume dB. The decibel volume will be this number, and that's what we're setting the mixer to. Okay. I'm sorry, Drixie. We gotta do a little math sometimes in order to make the video games. Is that right? I think I want to flip this. I think this is negative 80.25. So if value lerp is 1, then we have a max volume of 5. If we're at 0, we're at negative 80. And negative 80 is as low as we can go, so that's essentially the same as muting that group. What was this at to begin with? 0.3, sure. Okay, so then we probably want to at some point update the audio manager with whatever the default options were. So when you load a new file and we initialize your save data, we probably want to do like audio manager dot instance dot set mixer volume, and we're going to want to do that for each entry in the option data. Audio option data inside of the option data audio options dot values. That should give us all of the option datas, and then we want to pass in whatever the mixer type is for this entry and whatever the default volume was. Okay, and that should get the audio manager in the correct state when we load a game. Now we need to make it so that it updates in here. I guess we're doing that. So this should work. So as we move up and down on the different audio meters, we are going to save what our current mixer type is. And then based off of whatever our current mixer type is, when we push left and right on the D-pad, we will move the option volume up and down and then set the mixer value of the option manager. And that should be functional. It won't visually show anything yet, but we should be able to see the values changing here at the very least. Did we crash? We did. Okay, I was afraid of this. Oh, it's actually something I didn't anticipate. We have not set up the references. So we're gonna need a reference to music mixer and the audio master mixer. And now maybe it'll work? Yeah, we're in. Don't have control with the controller. That's fine, we can use keyboard. Okay, if we look at the audio mixer, it's set to some wildly different numbers. So if I hit left and right here, I'm not seeing these change. So let's add some debugging and see if we're actually doing anything at all. I would have expected the audio manager to be changed just from the get-go. I haven't actually tested this set float value. This is something we pulled from the documentation, but we haven't actually seen it work in code yet. Sound options screen, process directional input. I am pushing back and forth. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're in. We have a volume of 10. Okay. Which means we should have a alert value of 1. So we should be setting our decibels for music to be 5. And then, can we actually see that here? Not easily. Yeah, I can't quite tell. This is the base mixer, but I'm not seeing an entry for volume. But we're not seeing it update here because these things should, one of them should be set to 5 now. But they seem to be maintaining. If we hit edit and play mode, and then we hit left and right on these, this is coming in here. This is seeing that we are at max volume. It is trying to update the audio manager. It's going through all of this work. We're at max volume. And again, it's setting float on it. No change. Okay, so all the code we've written is working as intended. It's something about this logic here that is not working. Let's take a look at the audio manager. Directly under global scenes, global managers, audio manager. So it is referencing these elements inside of here, which is this set of mixers. And we're modifying this value here for volume. And we're not getting any change. Okay, we're gonna double check the APIs again for this. Unity audio mixers. Unity audio mixer. We want scripting API. For set float. Okay. So in here, this API is saying that we should be able to do mixer.setVolume with that all being lowercase, which is what we've done for set float. Yep. And this is an audio mixer. Maybe the typing is wrong. What did we set here? Audio mixer group. Does that matter? No, because the group internally has an audio mixer, which I believe we're accessing and changing the float value on. Okay. So that shouldn't really matter too much, I wouldn't think. So according to the API, this should be working. Now it does call out that set float follow doesn't work on awake, on enable, and runtime load after scene. Bootstrap is happening. Ooh, this is happening on awake. I don't know if it matters that we're trying to do the set mixer stuff in a coroutine. We don't need the game data stuff up right now. We can move that to one side. So what are we doing wrong? This is my least favorite thing to solve on stream is API stuff. Okay, they recommend minus 80 to 20 for the volumes. That's also good to know. To see your exposed parameters, double-click on your audio mixer. This opens the audio mixer window. At the top right of the audio mixer tab is Exposed Parameters button to show a list of exposed parameters. Oh. So that would imply that we have not exposed volume? That could be interesting. List is empty. Yeah, this should be the right option. So the question then becomes, how do we expose that value? Right-click on the parameter you want to expose in the audio mixer expector window and choose Expose Parameter Name to Script. Reading the documentation explains the documentation. Okay. Interesting. So this implies that these are the parameter names I need to be giving, because I'm renaming them here. So then inside of Audio Manager, instead of volume, should I be giving this value? And then we're going to guess that we give music and then sound effects. Okay. Let's stop debugging because I think we've proven that we're at least hitting the code properly. And let's give that another shot here. So if we hit play, they all got set to 21 right off the bat. And then if I come in here and push left and right, I can move it all the way up to 5 and then all the way down to -20. Okay, cool. So a little bit of a gotcha with the needing to expose the actual volume parameters and give them proper names. Let's make sure that we did that correctly for each one so we can move the master audio slider, the music one can go up and down, and the sound effects can go up and down. Now, let's have it so the actual UI in-game represents the same change here. Easiest approach is going to be just to make a new type of data component that operates on our option data. So if we go into front end data components, let's look at, oh, I don't know which one would be a good reference, but at the very least, we're going to need to make a new data-driven parent component, which will drive all of these. And we're going to need to refresh the UI when we make a modification, which should be fine. Let's call this option data-driven component. Visual Studio and Unity are going to have a think for a minute. Okay. And this becomes option data-driven parent, and it will operate on the option data that we built. So it will basically take this game object with this information and pass it on down into all of our UI. And then we need to make some actual components that will do stuff with that data. No, too upbeat for strategist right now. Too low energy for blinded. Forest of Fairies. Let's do that for now. Background music updated. All right, option components seems to be the naming convention we have here. We're going to be changing some text. So which one of these is a reference to changing text values? I assume one called name is going to be a good reference for that. Unity and Visual Studio are having another think. Okay, it looks like it's okay now. So we will call this option audio Well, we're going to need two. We're going to need one for updating the progress bar, and we're going to need one for updating the text. It's not name. Maybe it's audio, option audio amount component? Okay, Visual Studio, please. Thank you. So this will take option data. It'll take in a text object, and then it will need to know what type of audio mixer it's going to be operating on. Audio mixer types. Audio mixer type. And then from the stored data, it's going to access the audio options of the specific type, and it's going to get out the volume amount. And once again, we're going to need to do this lerp from 0 to 10. Starting to feel like if we're repeating it this many times, we might want to maybe build this functionality into something so that we don't have to keep repeating ourselves, because we're going to have to do this again in a second. Maybe it's fine. So then we're going to do lerp times 100, because I think I want to still do percentages. This is a bit of a roundabout way of doing this, but could save myself a little bit of math by just optimizing. Once again, let's get it functional and we'll go from there. Okay. So we have the volume amount. We're going to convert that to a string. And then we're going to add a percentage sign to the end of it. And that should be good enough. Then we're going to copy this component. We're going to rename this one to option audio fill bar component. And this one is going to handle the image side of things. We should have a good example of that somewhere else here. We must use a fill bar somewhere. The experience bar component looks like it would be a good one to reference. Okay, come on. Why are you moving me all over the place? So this has the fill bar image and it just uses fill amount. Okay. So instead of text, we're going to do this, and we're going to do, we need to update oh, it doesn't like that I started with the fill bar stuff, I don't think. No. Not system drawing. Okay, sure. I'm not sure why it was giving me difficulty on that. Fill amount will be equal to the lerp value directly. Perfect. And that should work fine. Let's go into the options screen and then add these data update components. So on the where do I want to put this? I think it's fine to put it here at the kind of base level of the components, and we'll just update all the components at the same time. So we're going to do an option data-driven option data-driven parent component, and then here we're going to have the audio mount and the audio fill, and then that will be the first two, so that'll be this one and this one. I'm going to make sure to put in my extra little blocker window so that I don't cover what I'm working on. Then we're going to add another amount component, another fill bar, and then this one will be for music. And that will be the second entry, which will be this one here and this one here. And then we're going to do it again for amount and fill bar. And these last two will be for sound effects. And that will be this text object and this fill bar image. Okay, cool. Then we're going to need to update the screen to take in that object type. So we'll make a variable called option data components, and then I think anytime we modify the option data, which will be when we actually increase its value in some way, we're going to want to call refresh screen components. We're also going to want to initialize this with the option data when we open the screen. So here we're going to want to do option data components dot update data, and we're going to point that at the option manager dot instance dot option data. Perfect. And I think that should just have our UI updating every time we increase or decrease the volume, just like that. Options, sound. Oh, what did we do wrong? Didn't actually set the object up. We need to, now that we've created the parameter in here for components, we are going to need to drag this into there. Option data parent. It looks like I found the right one. I'm going to just make sure by locking this. Let's open another inspector over here. We're going to select this one, and we're going to make sure that it's getting the right one. I believe it did, but we're going to just double check. We want it specifically to be updating the parent, and the parent will go through and find all these subcomponents and make sure they are all refreshed and updated with data correctly. Cool. Game view. Let's try this. So we're going to come into here, options, sounds. We are not seeing that information update. Are we seeing any kind of errors? We are not seeing any errors. And let's validate it's actually doing something. So if we come back into mixer groups, we can see that this value here is going up and down as I change this, but these are not. Okay. Let's see if we're hitting the refresh, which should be here. We will also add a breakpoint inside of the actual components themselves, as these should be changing. Okay, we get to refresh. We come in here. Do we need to initialize? Yeah, if we don't call init, it's not going to actually like generate all of the objects correctly. And we should really call terminate as well, which will clear everything up. Simple problems with using data components. It's just been a minute. So I think we want to do this data update after the init. And we're going to want to override the menu screen's close. Don't believe close takes any arguments. And then we're going to call base.close. And then we should be able to terminate the data components. Cool. Proper setup. Now maybe it'll work? If I keep saying it, it has to be true. We've seen it before in previous streams. Oh, interesting. So this is hard to explain. But if I hit left, it went up. Now it's going down. If I hit right, it went down again. Interesting. Something about the way it controls is a little bit off. Also, it's rounding weird. Yeah, we can just do that. That should reduce the rounding oddness. But that's not going to fix the controls. So that's something about the way that I have my navigation hooked up. It's like kind of floaty. Oh, is it always one step behind? So I'm hitting right, and then this one updated. If I come back up here and hit down, this one updated. If I come down here and hit this one updated. So it's always refreshing slightly before the effects have taken hold. Right, that makes sense because we're calling refresh before we update the audio. Okay, cool, good talk. Okay, so it's not that my controls are floaty or something, it was just a really weird timing issue that my brain was interpreting as like, oh, it must just be that the joystick is broken. Not that I just wrote the code in the wrong order. Okay. Now this should feel responsive. Yep. Perfect. Now I can't hold the button down, which is interesting. I have to tap. Let's get the controller hooked up real quick. I'm curious if we're going to get different behavior. Oh, still no? Whoa, why? Because I hooked up the wrong device. Okay. Still no control. There we go. So now we're in. Yeah, and I can't hold. Whoa, but joystick works. Joystick is way too responsive. So D-pad and key presses on the keyboard are... Sorry, let me move closer back to the computer. I was pretty far away. So these are individual clicks, but joystick is essentially letting you move as much as you want. We haven't really done this a whole lot, but let's take a look at our UI navigation input. This is how we have all the actual input stuff hooked up. So this is for the gamepad. This is for the left stick. This is for WASD on the keyboard. And this is for diagonals on the number pad, which was something I was experimenting with. These are all digitalized digital normalized. Don't know if that's right or wrong. And each of these vectors are just a composite part of this information. Oh, interesting. I can set different use in control scheme. So if we wanted to, we could have an option for keyboard and an option for controller, and then have it so that this thing is switching between different configurations. I don't know how to set that up, but that seems like it could be cool. So this is a value, so that's why we're getting an actual Pt.2 number, but we're not getting... But for these ones, it's a single click. Interesting. Derived bindings I don't think matters. Ooh, interesting. You can set up dead zones for the axes. Ooh, you can change the typing. These interactions are probably more bindings of things we could listen for. If we take a look at the screen controller, which manages all of our audio, or our controls, I should be able to see here. This is on perform. Is pressed, performed, started. So the lightning bolt ones are input actions. If I was to add interactions for hold, this is more for holding the button down before it sends the command. Interesting. Yeah, these are not what we're looking for. They're neat. Cool to know we have that type of control to set up more types of events, essentially. But not what I want. What I'm curious on is if there's a way to normalize the behavior between tapping on a button versus holding the joystick left and right. Alright, well, I'm going to dig into that off camera because that could take me hours. I was hoping there might be a quick option for that, but I'm not seeing anything that immediately looks like that that option. Yeah, there's no way to say, hey, I would like to have this be able to send information when held down. It might be these modes. I guess it's also because we're tracking performed. No, performed should be the right one here. Started would be only on the press of the button. Perform should be a continuous check. So the joystick is sending a constant message every time you hold it down. Like, a lot. Like a lot. Whereas the WASD and the D-pad are only sending it on click, and if you hold, it doesn't continue to send messages. Okay, I'll have to dig into that. And there isn't even an option for the sticks to be like, hey, I'd like to have some sort of delay. Because we could set up a new interaction for like hold time, but that's like how long you need to hold it before it starts ticking. What I want is like a cooldown almost, where it's like I want to send the inputs or listen for the inputs after kind of a short interval change. Which I could build directly into like the on movement changed callback. This could have like a cooldown essentially that it won't send another message to the screen until enough time has elapsed. But the input system for Unity should be able to handle that somewhere. I just don't know where it is offhand. Okay, cool. Let's ignore that for now. Let's assume that this thing is functional. The way that it controls with D-pad versus joystick is a little odd, but not the biggest deal. We did break it in some way because I was no longer in control, but that might just be because of controlling or messing around with the controls while we were running. I can go back. I can update these. We should see... We have the background music playing. We should actually turn on the in-game audio. Oh. Well then. Whoa, little loud, little loud. Yeah, that range is a little bit off. Like, if we start to lose the sound of the audio entirely pretty quickly, and I feel like I don't want to go too loud here. That's quite a bit louder. If we go all the way up to 90, yeah, 100 is quite loud. And then if we go down to like 40, it's still audible, but pretty far off. I think I'd rather have it so that the percentages are kind of less of a direct scale, 1-to-1 on the dB, and more that like it is like a curve, so that as you get down to like 30%, it drops much quicker. But like at 40 or 50, I feel like it should still be much higher than this. So we want to try and figure out some sort of distribution, and that'll require some playing around. But right now, the amount it's changing the values is a bit odd. Oh, and does sound effects work? Yeah, that's louder. And that's basically not audible. Okay. I mean, those are control options. Ooh, worth checking. Yeah, and now it's completely disappeared. So like 50% to 100% is basically down to 0 anyways. So like -40 is essentially inaudible. I think maybe we just need to change our bottom range to not be all the way to -80. Okay, so if we change this to 90, 50, and 100, does our save system work? Well, no, because we have not actually updated it to do anything. So we have a save function here, which should save out our data. Let's go into... Let's mute. When we update and refresh the components, we should also do option manager .instance.save. I don't know if this is going to be saving too much or too often. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so we're going to restart this. We're going to go back to 70% on all of these. But then if we close and reopen, it should remember whatever the options we chose were. Unlockable with the hydrate 10 minutes ago, which I did not see. I'll redeem that now. And that does look like it saved my information. 90, 50, 20. Close and reopen. $90, 50, 20. Perfect. Next problem. We need to make it so this one can be changed as well. That one's a little trickier. So we have the sound stuff. We're gonna want to do something similar in here. So we're gonna want to steal the directional D-pad stuff. But we're not gonna want to do any of the volume work. Instead, we're going to want to check the navigation control types, which I actually think that should be control type. Is that going to break our save file? It might. Okay. In fact, I'm not going to make that change right now because I'm not sure how to fix that if we do break the save file by making that modification. So if the control types is equal to cardinal, then we're going to change the value to be equal to diagonal? Is that how we have it set up in UI as well? Oh, this is still locked. So we have cardinal and then diagonal. Which is what we have set up here. Okay, so if you hit to the right, we should change the value. And then we're going to want to have a similar set of data controllers that we set up here. Which is probably also honestly working off of option data. And so we can just take all of the open and close logic here and just add that there. Okay, we're going to call refresh, we're going to call save, and we shouldn't need to call out to any other managers in this situation. And then we do the exact same thing in reverse. If we hit the left direction and we're on diagonal, we will change our control type to cardinal. Oh, we're missing a step here. we need to know which button you have selected. But we only have one button, so maybe we're not missing a step. Maybe this is fine for the time being. Eventually, we'll need to have some sort of like, what was your current selected option? And then depending on your option, do different behaviors. But because we only have one option right now, we can just assume that you're just modifying your navigation controls. Sure. Bit hacky, but it's fine. Here, we're gonna basically do a pretty simple flip. If we're cardinal controls, we're gonna go diagonal. And if we are diagonal, we're going to change to cardinal. And because these both are going to refresh, we can just pull this out of the switch statement and clean this up. So essentially, if you hit A, it's just going to toggle between the two options. We don't need to worry about on select, but eventually we will, so we'll leave it here. Then we're going to need to create a new data component. So for options, we're going to copy this one's actually a little different. Maybe even more straightforward. Sure, we're going to copy fill bar. We're going to rename this one to option navigation toggle component. And this is going to operate on option data. And it is going to care about the navigation control types. So toggle object. We're essentially going to set the activity of a game object based off of whether or not the option data is currently set to the same control type that this component is set to. If they match, we toggle it on. If they don't match, we toggle it off. Cool. Now we can come into here. We're going to add a option data-driven parent and a navigation toggle. And we're going to add two of them, one for cardinal and one for diagonal. Cardinal will be the first one here, and this will be the second. Okay. Then we have to come into gameplay. We're going to do the same thing we did a minute ago. We're going to select here, lock this one, and then come into here. Gameplay. We're going to drag the option data parent into here as the piece we want to update. And that should just work. Actually, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Cool. So if I leave this on diagonal and I leave and then come back, it should remember my setting choice. And it does. Oh. What happened there for a second? That was an interesting bug. I had hit A on sound, but there was nothing spawned, and then when I hit back, I reappeared here. I don't know. Okay, can't recreate that right now. Maybe I failed to hit the button hard enough, and so it just didn't respond. I'm not sure. Cool. So that is the UI functional. The audio is working. The gameplay part, I don't know how I'm going to solve right now. We probably want to come into this ability select screen, and we're going to want to decide our given direction based off of the direction vector differently. Like right now we read that direction vector and we just pass it directly in here, and then we just get direction. And that just assumes some angle stuff. And then we get a rounded angle. I think we want to do something in this logic that like adds an offset to this math. So if you're pushing diagonal, these numbers will be slightly different. Yeah, I don't know what that math is right now. The question is whether or not the direction extensions should directly ask the options manager for the option data and the current navigation control type. Maybe. It feels a little weird to me that this would be directly it feels odd that we would be doing this inside of a direction extensions function, but maybe it's fine because this is literally the point where we're figuring out your direction based off of what option you've chosen. Yeah, I'll figure out the actual implementation of the math function later, but the point is that we can now go into an option screen, we can toggle the type of navigation we control we want, we can modify our audio, and those things are actually being retained and saved. And then when we go to input stuff, I'll eventually need to decide based off of what navigation control you've input, how that affects the player's movement. That's less of a problem right now. It's mostly the setup that I was concerned about. And now once again, I cannot click anything when we come back here. Do we have any errors? We do. Sound effect errors. That shouldn't be real. Like, it shouldn't affect our ability to navigate. Huh. And we don't have any breakpoints or anything? I guess we did modify the files. I made saves. Unity doesn't like it when you save scripts. Okay, cool. So that is the option screen functional. I got it again. Okay, so I came in here and nothing happened. Am I modifying audio at this point? If I push left and right, I am. Okay, so there is some sort of bug where when you first come into the sound screen, it doesn't open. Did we get any kind of error? We did trigger a transition from the option screen to the sound option screen. So that should have caused the UI to appear. Oh, is it this bug again? Oh, it's this bug again. We need to make sure these things are toggled on. Okay, well, at least I figured it out faster than yesterday's stream. Because those things get auto-disabled when you turn them on. So if they're not on by default, then they won't toggle and appear. Okay, cool. So we can set these options. I think another one I realized we might want to have is a tab for graphics as well. What resolution you want, whether or not you want full screen, windowed. We'll figure out that later. The next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to get a pause screen in so that you can modify sound and gameplay options inside of an actual like map when you're walking around in the world. So let's take a copy of the options folder. Let's paste that whole thing inside of screens. Unity and Visual Studio are going to have a think about that for a moment. Having a good long think because we modified a bunch of folders. Okay, and then we're going to rename this to pause. We're going to rename the prefab to pause. We're going to delete the gameplay and sound versions of the screens because we really only need the main one here, options. We're going to name this pause screen. And we will make a pause menu component. Now we're going to come into each of these, rename those in turn, and this should be a relatively quick setup compared to the option screen. The option screen I had to figure out like how we want to lay it out, what the look of it was going to be. I think this one should be a lot simpler. Pause menu. It's going to initialize a couple of strings. Pause screen. There may be a world where eventually we show like some player stats or some other information in here. Like maybe I end up not liking the idea of a pause screen directly. Maybe we do more of a like traditional RPG Final Fantasy, like press Y to bring up like your status screen. We might do something like that, but for the time being, this should be an easy way to get to options. So we're going to delete these two. We're going to rename pretty much everything in here to pause. This becomes pause components. Let's go to scene view. I think this background image goes stretch. We're going to... How did we do this yesterday? We set this to full size, I think. Then we went to here and then times this by 90%. I think I want to times this by like maybe even 40%. And then times this by 60. We're just going to recreate the same kind of layout. We're going to call this pause. We're going to get rid of most of the option information in here. Same thing here. This idea of options doesn't really exist. And we don't have gameplay variations. We only have the pause components. This changes to be a vertical menu again. This layout list gets removed as we need a vertical version instead of a horizontal version. We don't forced expand the children. Okay. And then we're going to need a couple of buttons. I think the first and most easiest one is going to be... is it continue? I guess it's continue. These are not center aligned. This needs to be way smaller. 64 times 3. Sure, 192. And we're just gonna kind of fill the space a little bit more evenly. Nah, fine. Yeah, we can do... a setup like this. I don't really... Actually, this is going to look weird because they're not going to be even to each other. Yeah, so we want this to be left-aligned text. If we want these to be more centered, I think I want something closer to this. And then, rather than use these extra buttons, we're just going to copy new ones. We're going to name this one Quit. This is Options. And this is Continue. Sure. And then we need to add another entry. So this is this button, and then for the third one, it will be the quit button. The text in these is going to be quit, and then we will give it quit as the ID. This one is going to be options screen because it's actually going to open the options. And this one will be continue with the keyword for continue. Okay. Now, here this gets replaced with our new pause screen. Hook this up to here, remove this old one, rename the entity ID to match the screen name, rename the pause components to match pause components, and then we have to set up some transitions. And then I think we're mostly done. We gotta write a little bit of logic in the screen itself to determine what happens when you click each of these buttons. But once we do the transition, most of the data setup is good to go. Content design data. Copy options. Rename it to pause. Drag it out. Delete these two variations. This is going to be going from the combat select screen, ability select screen. And we're going to be going from the pause screen and going to the pause screen. Okay, and this becomes screen transitions for pause. This becomes pause open. This becomes pause close. We need these component names here because this is what we want to be toggling on and off. We're going to update the list of transition subtype things and add that so that when we hit compile, it will add the options from that child transition list to here. So that should function. We're going to look at the UI navigation. Do we already have the concept of a start button? We do. Start on the gamepad or the 5 key on the numpad. Sure, why not? So then we should be able to go back into scripts. we're already using the start button. Why? Okay. So right trigger is triggering the interactability, essentially. I didn't realize start was doing the same thing. It doesn't have to. Instead, we're going to make it so start is going to try and do a screen controller. Just grab this screen controller open, and it's going to try and open the pause screen. I don't think we need to pass any data. Can we do that? Or do we need to... Yeah, we can. It'll pass in arguments of null. Perfect. So now when we are choosing our ability for moving or attacking an enemy, we should be able to hit the start button. That'll try and open up this screen. And then as we go up and down and select these options, depending on what we get, we're either going to get... let's look at boot. Boot screen. Like this. We're going to get some data. We're going to either pass in the screen we're opening, which will be the pause variation. We'll get continue, which will essentially just call screen controller... nope, not capture. Screen controller dot instance dot close. Pop screen. I think we probably want to use the internal version because that bypasses some stuff. And then continue, and then we have quit. Quit is a more complicated one. I think I want two different buttons here, actually. I want a quit button, which remains this one. But then we also want a main menu button. And this should take you back to the boot screen, essentially. So you could like load a different save or reload from a last autosave if you wanted to. But sadly, we can't send that directly to open screen because I'm not actually sure how to do this. To do return to boot scene. We have some examples I think I can reference. Right, and then we should be able to just do quit with this application.quit. That should be okay. Okay, so main menu won't do anything right now. But the other one should. And I believe if I set up all my data correctly, copy and pasted everything to the right spots, gave the right component IDs to everything, or the right entity IDs to everything, we set up all the transitions, we compiled the transition manager, we should be able to go into a game and hit start to pause. At least if we're in control of the character. So that's good too, the way that we've set this up. You won't be able to do it during a cutscene, I don't think. Let's new game and see. While we're talking to the goddess, can we bring up the option menu? I'm gonna guess no. Yeah, we do not have control at this point. So which screen is open? I guess it's combat base. Yeah, so we're at like a base level of the screen UI, but we haven't actually opened the like player control. Is that... That might be a little annoying. Like, you can't stop at any point here and exit. But also, I don't know what would happen if you tried to, like, go to main menu in between scenes and stuff. Like, or during a cutscene. It feels okay to me that I'm basically saying, hey, you need to get to the point where you're in control to be able to bring up the menus. Now, that is not working. It says that we are in the ability select screen. But I'm hitting start and nothing's happening. Okay, let's take a look at process input and where it gets called from the screen controller. Process input comes in from every different version here, including the start button, which we did look at, and we know that that UI is set up to the controller start or to numpad 5. So we should be getting in here and getting to this open screen call. But we are not. Let's see what happens. Let's add a breakpoint here as well. Let's go back to game view. Let's hit start. We are hitting a breakpoint. We're processing some input. The input is start. It does know. It's trying to open the pause screen. Trying to find a screen with the name. It did not find... Oh! Yeah. Always one more thing with the screen setup. We didn't actually put it in the scene. We made the prefab for it. I think we hooked up everything correctly for it. But we did not actually come into here and drag a pause screen in. We'll want it to be behind options. And otherwise that should be good. Okay. Now we'll go back to boot. Okay. Continue. Autosave, Demon's Castle, Pt.2. After the cutscene, we can move. Okay. So we're opening the pause screen. And we are getting the option screen instead. Screen transitions all the way to the bottom. If we are in combat ability and we're going to pause, I also missed hooking these ones up. We updated their components, but we didn't modify those. Okay. So close. Dum 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 dum. Oh, come on, Unity. Continue. Demon Lord's Castle, Pt.2. I can't do anything. I can't open the menu. As soon as I hit close on that, we can bring up pause. We need to update quit to actually be a part of the list. We need to add that 4th button. If we hit continue, that just internal pops, which closes that screen and we can move around still. We can also just hit the back button. I'm going to try with controller. Yep, that feels good. If we hit options, we don't get anything. Now that kind of makes sense. We didn't actually set up any transitions for that one. We only set up a transition from pause to options. So let's add this to the pause screen. Let's go from the pause screen to the options screen. We're not going to want to do a close on pause, but we are going to want to open options, because it's just going to open up over top. Maybe there's a world in which we want to close the pause screen in behind. Maybe we do like semi-transparent windows at some point or something. But for the time being, this is okay. And then we're going to go from the option screen back to opening pause. And we're going to do options close. Cool. Here, compile that new list. That should have added a couple more entries at the bottom. It did. Yeah, here. Cool. Oh, I also want to update that menu list. Pause prefab. Should be able to do that here. This list needs one more button. Specifically, not this one, but the menu button underneath. That looks good. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. All right, here we go. Continue. Reload that scene again. A press through the initial stuff. We can walk around. We hit start. We hit options. We can come in here, change the controls. We can change the volume, which doesn't do anything because we have it muted in Unity. Main menu won't do anything right now. And if I hit quit, that also doesn't do anything. But if we were in a real build, it would, I think, close the application. I haven't tested that, but I believe that's what application.quit should do. Cool. And so now that option menu that we have created can now be modified and edited not just from the boot screen, but also from in-game just by hitting the pause button. Sweet. Quick and easy. So yeah, this is like, I don't know if people are fully grasping it, but the amount of work that is involved in making a new screen can feel like a fair amount sometimes, because we have to make the prefab, we have to make the screen components, we have to make the sub components, we have to hook up the logic for what's going to happen when you hit the different buttons. It's just, UI at some level is just tedious. But the power of the screen system that I've built is mostly the fact that we can go to this option screen here and back out and like have a stack of screens over top of each other, and they don't have to directly know about each other. Like, the option screen has no idea about the pause screen, only as far as like there's some script that like says to open that screen, and then we have some transition stuff that just says when I'm going from this screen to this screen, you know, play these sequences. And right now those sequences are just simply turning on and off components, making things visible and invisible, very simply. Like, this is just turning off the pause component, or turning on the pause components and turning off the pause components. But these sequence steps could do a lot more. We could have it so that when we hit the start button, the pause screen like slides in from bottom of the screen. And then we could have like when you hit options, that like expands up from the center. But for some of this stuff, it also just feels snappy to have it just up here. So it is a little non-responsive where if I'm midway through a tile walk and I hit start, it doesn't respond. It's not until you actually finish moving and going to where you want to be and you're still that you can actually hit the pause button. Less than ideal. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time trying to fix that right now, though. I think I probably still want to wait to bring up the screen until after your character has finished moving. Or if an enemy's attacking you, I probably don't want you to pause while you're getting hit. But at the very least, if you hit the start button, I feel like it should acknowledge your input and bring up the menu as soon as it next can. Or if you're getting hit, maybe we want to be bringing up the pause menu like on the right side of the screen or something, such that you can still see your character get hit, and then when the hit is over, it like slides in. I don't know. There's some stuff we could do, I'm sure. Let's see about going to the main menu. So when we go to boot, boot is simply a screen that chooses a starting screen. There's really nothing special about this screen at all. It's just really an empty scene. And I believe, didn't I make another empty scene already for screen only? Yeah. And I used this. Okay, the exciting demo stuff is over. We can go back down a level. So I used this screen when we made the Goddess Realm stuff. The end of run screen stuff was built around that. But I've ripped all of that up now, haven't I? Is it still commented out somewhere? Because I need an example of how to go to a screen only, how to go to the screen only scene. Because it's not going to be a dungeon transition. That's part of the editor window. Yeah, so we don't have any references to how to go to this anymore because I ripped out all of that logic. The question is it going to be faster to rebuild it or faster to look it up in like file histories to see how I did it before? Okay, let's see if we can figure it out. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do a transition of some kind. Not a transition between zones. Sometimes we do a transition to dungeon through the dungeon transition manager. But this is going to try and load all the board and tile stuff and all the enemies if we do it this way. So I think we just want to use a standard transition manager. It also looks like I have misspelled transition manager without an I in the past. That's super, super fun. Transition between scenes. So we have used this in Era of Embers to go to random encounters. We also had a transition to town. Which is a very old thing that's no longer in operation. But I think this is the idea. Okay, so I think pause menu, which we have lost. Pause screen, when we call main menu, is going to want to cause a transition to is town the same thing? Yeah, these are all just empty screens. I think we could probably delete, honestly, even boot and town, because they're all just empty scenes with the global scene checkers that like cause us to load up all the rest of our scene files to make sure everything's set up correctly. So we want to load up to IT screen only as our scene, and then I think we're going to go back to boot screen. Yeah, no arguments, because that's how the splash screen is working now. Okay. The only other question I have then is, does this handle like closing the screen all the way back down to 0? No. This does a swap. Unfortunate. Okay, so then I think before we can effectively call this, we have to transition the menu system. We have to close what we're currently in. So I think we do an internal pop screen to get rid of the pause menu, and then we go to transitioning to the boot screen. I don't know if this is going to work, but if I understand my systems, it might. Wrong scene. We need to go to boot. Let's continue from this one. Okay. Main menu. So that did load us into the screen controller, but we did not load up the boot screen correctly. Let's take a look at the console. So we did an internal pop. We went from the pause screen to combat ability select. So I think we want to go back one more screen. I guess not. This is still fine. It's saying that the last screen we were on was combat base. And then it's adding a... No, that's incorrect, because the transition it's adding here is for ability select. Yeah, so we want to do... close to destination screen, which is used in a number of different spots to close down to the base. I don't care where we are, just go all the way back to the base screen. It should be open somewhere in the stack, and it should be essentially the bottom of all our screens. It's essentially, combat base is the base of all of our UI stacks. And so from here, then we'll swap to the transition screen, thus removing the base from the stack entirely, and we'll just have transition. And then when the transition's over, we should go back to the boot screen. Interesting. Okay, so now we are going from the pause back to ability select. And then we're popping ability select back to base. And then it's saying our last screen was splash, which seems odd to me, but for the actual transition it's doing combat base to the transition screen. And then it's doing the combat or the scene transition screen to the boot screen. Okay. If we take a look at boot, boot is here. Do we not have a subcomponent? Do I have to go sort through this whole thing? Let's search opening screens for boot. So it looks like we can go from the load screen to boot, from splash to boot, and from options to boot, but screen transition to boot is not an option. So we're going to need to add boot screen from screen transition. I think this should be a cloud transition though. How do I do that? Because this transition between scenes has a spawn entity? What does that spawn entity need to be? Because in this situation, we don't have a spawn entity, so I'm not sure why it even needs that information. Some of this stuff feels a little muddy to me. I don't think it does need it. I think that this value doesn't matter in this situation because we don't actually load a dungeon. If we lose, we just leave. This isn't being used anymore, but that's funny. This is what I'm looking for. I want to do this. And now that we're doing that, we want to change the screen we're going to be closing to be the cloud transition. And we're going to do close on the cloud and then boot open. Sure. So I think we were successfully going back to the boot screen, but because we didn't have a transition set up, it wasn't actually like turning any of the UI on for it. Technically, we probably could have hit like AA to continue from the last autosave to test it. But what I've done now is I've set it up so that when we go from pause screen, we're going to try and go back to the main menu via a cloud transition. And then it's going to close the cloud and it's going to open. Now, that's happening because of the order of those. This is not it's a little confusing because basically we're going to change it. So instead of doing the close sequence in the close sequence spot, we're going to do it in the open, and we're going to do the boot open on close. And this is just more a like bad naming convention. Over time I've realized this is really just like sequence 1, sequence 2. And sometimes you want to put the open before the close, and sometimes you want to put the close before the open. It depends on the setup you're looking for. But in this situation, if we do the close of the cloud before we open the screen, then you're not going to see anything but darkness in behind. So we can come into here. We save when we enter into rooms. So we can reveal all this. We can go back to the main menu. It's going to cloud transition us off. We're going to come back to the boot screen. We can hit continue, and we can continue from that same autosave. And it's going to load back a few moments. And I think that's okay. This does open it up to, if players want, they can be fighting something and then lose. And rather than take the loss, if they don't want to replay that run again, they can just, you know, pause. Well, you wouldn't be able to do it as the transition is happening. If you try and pause while the transition is happening, it won't work because it won't let you have control. But if you're losing a fight and you shouldn't be doing this, or you don't want to, you could technically main menu and then continue. And then you can restart that room essentially. It feels a little weird. No, it doesn't. Sorry. It feels exploitable, but it's a single player game. If you want to exploit it and like save scum, that's the RPG system. Like, fine. You want to hit main menu and restart that room? Restart that room. I'm not going to design you out of however you want to have fun. Yeah, this is great. So now we have a full loop. We can come into scenes. At any point, I can be like, cool, main menu. Continue. Reload. Oh, that's a cool sequence. I like that sequence. It's pretty neat. I can't hit start or anything because it's doing a cutscene, but as soon as it gives me back control, I can come back into main menu. I can do it again. Surprisingly feels a lot more like a video game. I knew it would. I knew as soon as we added like a pause menu, option menu, even if they're a bit rough around the edges right now, like I still think that as you switch between these, it should be revealing the different buttons. You shouldn't have to click in to actually get the stuff to appear. So there's like optimizations and changes I'd like to make. But the fact that I can come in here and tweak like my audio settings, even if I want to refine what the range of what 90% versus 10% means. Again, it's rough around the edges, but it still feels like so much better to just even be able to go back here. Having the buttons here is nice. I will say even there, I want to hit left and right, but that doesn't do anything. Could I make that do something? Bet you I could. How do these buttons navigate between each other? Oh, it's like constructed. I think it's constructed. One of these menu components is like auto-generating the up, down, left, right. What if I make it menu style? Ooh. If I make it explicit, what does that do? Set up navigation. If vertical, set everything up and down. If horizontal, if mode automatic, let it be automatic. What happens if we just set it to automatic? I guess explicit would also do what I want. Ooh. If I hit automatic, it actually it toggles on both horizontal and vertical. Interesting. Okay, automatic works fine. Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh, no, what did it do? I hit left and right and it took me off the screen. Oh, no. Oh, this is... I'm looking at it in the prefab. What did it actually generate for the information? Screens, boot components, menu list. Yeah, visualize. Yeah, I don't fully understand how it chose to navigate between these. And my cursor is now gone and off the world. Okay, so this is probably easily solved by just changing the mode setup to explicit, because then my script won't do anything, it looks like, because it only auto sets stuff up for vertical, horizontal, and automatic. But if I set it to explicit, then I should be able to come into here, and under explicit navigation, I should be able to choose where these go. So selecting down should take you to options. On selecting up, kind of wants to take you to continue, but only if continue exists. On continue, down should take you to new game, and up should take you to YouTube. Discord on right press should take you to YouTube. YouTube on left press should take you to Discord. Quit should be up, and down should be continue. Quit should go down to YouTube, and then up to options. And then options should go up to new game and down to quit. Okay, let's see if that works. I think it might. The only thing that might be a little weird is we might want to overwrite some of those. Yeah, and I can't push left or right on ones that are not set up for it. Yeah, and I can't push up or down here. It's a little weird. Maybe we make it so if you push down or up, it takes you to quit or continue. Same as basically what YouTube's doing. So Discord, let's make it so if you push down, it takes you to the continue button. And if you push up, it takes you to the quit button. And I still might need to write some custom logic in here so that if we toggle continue off, we'll need to change YouTube and Discord to point to new game. And we'll need to change new game to point to YouTube. And I think that's it. Cool. The not showing continue if you don't have any save files is something we'll want to do, but I don't feel like doing that right now. Shouldn't be too difficult when I get to it, but... Yep. So I guess the one that I care about people going to more should probably be in this slot, and I think it's actually Discord. So I might swap Discord and YouTube. Which I might even just do string swaps on those, just because it'll be easier than actually moving around all that navigation stuff I just did. So I'm going to just change this from Discord to YouTube. I'm going to change this one from YouTube to Discord. And then same thing here. So this becomes Discord. This becomes YouTube. And then the text also gets updated. Simply because this button will be easier to access. In order to get to this one, you'll have to come down specifically here and hit left. Whereas if you're just hitting up and down, you'll kind of naturally swing around to this one. So it is one extra click, or will always be a little bit extra clicking to get to YouTube, but it'll always be a little bit faster to get to the Discord button. Okay, cool. Options. Continue. It's feeling pretty good. I'm pretty happy to say that that's the option screen, at least in a good state. It's definitely better than not existing at all. I'd like to make some improvements around it not displaying when you first select something. So I'm gonna make a pure ref note, which we haven't done in a couple weeks, but we have also not been very much into kind of this type of development. So polish, we're going to add another note here, and we're going to say show option tab. I guess it's like sub tab when selecting tabs in options. Show option sub tab submenu when selecting tabs and options. That sounds a little better. This doesn't need to be nearly as big. Okay, just make a note for ourselves on that one. You know what? In fact, let's make this a list of notes. Add graphics tab is another thing we should do. Add more gameplay options. Fix screen to not assume only navigation. To not assume navigation is only button. Okay. Was there anything else that we saw that we wanted to take care of? Or we want to note? I guess we want to find better range for audio sliders. 50% is basically zero volume currently. And I would argue even like 60% was basically like zero volume. We got the main menu working, continues working. Okay. That scene still makes me happy. Okay. Cool. We're just over 2 hours. I feel like we accomplished what I wanted to do today. We have added the options screen. Can't open it here. But I can here. Cool. Yeah, this seems to all be working correctly. Sorry, I got distracted with playing the video game. So I guess we'll call it here. I don't think I'll get another chance to stream until probably the weekend, but I don't want to make any promises on exactly when. But as always, keep an eye on the Discord if you want to be up to date on that. I think next steps is probably more data entry stuff. I think there's some questions around checkpoints. I think there's also just general, like, data entry around, like, skill trees and stuff. I'd like to do more balance pass work. I'm pretty happy with the damage formulas as they currently stand. And, like, fighting this first enemy is feeling pretty good. I have some ideas for, like, how I want to change things up a little bit. Ooh, interesting. I have both bash and shoot. Oh. I was kind of curious about that. So I selected an ability and then I main menued back, reloaded that cutscene, and then chose something else. And it saved both as being unlocked. That means when we load a save, by adding the main menu button, we have added the ability for you to go back here and continue, and some of the save state information is not being fully reset. So some amount of information still exists about the save you were just in, like what abilities you have unlocked, and that is not getting reset. And when we do load, it's adding whatever needs to be loaded, but it's not undoing what was already there. Oh, that's gonna be a fun bug to figure out. Yeah, adding the main menu may have just opened up a whole can of worms in terms of save file manipulation. Alright, well, on that note, we're gonna call it. We'll be back probably somewhere on the weekend. I don't know when. And I think it's probably data entry at this point. It's a lot of just, like, fighting the enemies and using our abilities, making progress, eventually unlocking more further progression in the game, changing up the skill tree so that there's a better stat progression, unlocking new abilities, etc., etc. All right. For now, though, this is going to be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.